We're going to do questions. The way we want to do it is we want to have you go in and raise your hand in Zoom, and that's going to put you into the queue. And we're going to try and keep it simple this time. Make it a simple question, no long speeches, and one question per ask. You want a second question? Come on back into the queue, but give somebody else a chance. And Marshall, on to you.
Well, I'll just start this way. First, I'm glad to meet everyone. And I have a question for you all, which is, what has sustained you? What has sustained you since, Howard Dean? That would be 2003, 2004. And I'm really curious about what has sustained your engagement, your activism, and continued engagement, continued organization. Now, Ashley, you're muted. You're muted. Ashley, we're not learning the secret because you're muted.
Is that better?
That's much better, yes.
Okay. All right. We started out as Dean for America, and we came together in a Dean for America meetup. We did not know each other. We came from all walks of life. We were brought together because we were appalled by what was happening in Iraq. And Howard Dean was our candidate. Now, when he dropped out of the primaries, we, of course, were very disappointed, but we looked around, and at that point, we'd been working together for about 7 or 8 months, something like that. And well, frankly, we were in love with each other. We loved working together. We loved being with people who were progressive. We were all actually more progressive than Howard Dean. And just that camaraderie and that working together has just been so great. But that is what has sustained us. We sustain each other.
It seems way too rare what you're describing. And that's one reason I'm really curious about it. Yeah. What else? What are people's thoughts? What sustained you over the last 20 years?
So I'll say, I'm a more recent. I've only been in the club maybe 10 years. And what brought me in and kept me here was the activities. It's not just come to a meeting, it's come to a meeting and sign up to go do something. It was, we're going to Sacramento to talk to the legislators. We're going to go to Sacramento to talk about a bill. We're going to go testify. And so that is what brought me in, and that's what keeps me in. And right now, the last 2 years have been so hard because we haven't been able to go do anything, but we still talk to our legislators. And I think Ashley said that earlier, we're very involved every year talking to our local legislators and making sure the issues we're interested in, we're talking to them about.
Thanks, Susie. And I see Hank has his hand up.
Well, I wanted to say that in my 80 years, I've seen enormous positive changes and a lot of negative things to be concerned about. But the fact that when people organize, we can achieve positive change. And the civil rights movement and the tolerance and support for people, who have for their sexual preferences, and even in less so, but in international affairs. But I really think that, we can push for positive changes. And, I want to live to see a single payer healthcare system in the United States, but I get my faith from the civil rights movement, the women's movement, and all of the things that sort of we can look back on. So that's what keeps me going forward.
Thank you. Thanks. And I see Gail has her hand up.
Yeah, this club actually takes on issues, and they have influence, obviously have some influence on legislators, despite the fact that we're not dropping, millions of dollars in their pockets. So I really appreciate the feeling, not only are people very welcoming and, able to be comradely and keep, keep everybody harmonious. I think we have some leaders who are very good at that in this group. Not only that, which is very inspiring, but the fact that I feel this club actually has some effect, not as much as we like, but some. And I like to be effective and do things that make a difference.
And Diana?
So I am Gail's co-chair on the Social Justice Task Force. And my inspiration is more than just the club. The club is, one of the tools that I have to get things done. And it's a very effective tool. I think we'll all agree. My focus has been on housing insecurity, and then food, more recently food insecurity, but then realizing that when you're talking about social justice issues, they're all related. The medical, education, climate, food, housing, it's all related, right? And so in my own city, I was realizing that I wasn't having the impact I needed to as an advocate, and that's why I ran for office. I'm now vice mayor in Redwood City, but it's really those people that I've been successful in getting affordable housing built. I've been successful in getting food to people, and that's what sustains me.
Thanks, Diana. And Marshall?
I think what sustains me is knowing that as the ACLU, what Thomas Jefferson said, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And I know that over the 60 plus years that I've been involved in those many issues that Hank actually mentioned, the civil rights movement, reproductive rights, women's rights, et cetera, that we can have successes. And since I feel that equality and fairness is one of my driving forces that basically sustains me through the support and activism and successes that many groups I've been involved with have achieved, and the DFA has been a major one.
No, thank you. It's interesting to me because one thing I'm hearing is about the relational dimension, the working together, the benefits of that, and the motivation from that. That's one thing I'm hearing. Second thing I'm hearing is about action, that this is not that you're doing stuff, and that's action. And now the third is, I don't know, it's a little more implicit, but it's a question I'd ask, which is, you're involved in many different issues. What are the values? How would you describe the values you share? Because I suspect there's a lot of shared values here. I'm just curious how you might articulate them. Because it's something that goes deeper than issues is what I'm suggesting. And Diana, when you were saying these things are all connected with each other, that's what I'm trying to learn. Somebody said just.
Elsa?
Huh?
Elsa and then Rob?
I think it's Marshall's fairness and justice. And so that when we look at our neighbors, we don't feel they don't have as much ability to live a healthy and productive life as we do.
And let me encourage folks to just put a word in the chat that describes. Let's just kind of see what comes up there. Yeah, Gail?
Well, although the Catholic Church hasn't always been, in the forefront of justice, I am inspired quite a bit by that background. The story of a saint giving his cloak to the poor man in the snow. And also, the idea, I think, that circulates that if you are given advantages, you have a responsibility to give back. It's always been an underlying thing. And also, I like the Quaker motive, which is live simply that others may simply live.
That's nice. Pope Francis is doing what he can right now, but with reference to the church. But what else? Let me just take a look at the chat and see what's there. Family working together, social justice, thrive, not just exist. I like that. Acknowledging and responding to interdependence. Yeah. What else? What else? Care for all the world. Sense of service. Honesty.
Flavia, I see your hand up.
Loyalty to reality and all living things. Interesting. Nice way to put that. Yeah, Flavia?
Yeah, just that over the years, the organizing committee decides what we're going to work on next, the subsequent meetings. And so it's the relationship I have with the other members of the org committee that sustains me too. So these people I care about a great deal.
Yeah, well, from my perspective, that's the foundation of the whole thing. It's about people. And it's about the commitments and relationships that we have and make with one another, that without which it sort of fades away. But a related question I have, I'm interested in the shared values, but also you all practice democracy. You govern yourselves. There's a lot of groups out there that don't, or can't, or struggle with it, or fall apart, or spend their lives in organizations in which they have no say. And, if you think of democracy as not something you have, but something you do, then practicing democracy is, I'm curious, again, how have you sustained that? Or maybe I'm just thinking, I don't know, I've been working some with the Sunrise folks and with other folks, and you say the word structure and everybody like, oh my God. And there's something about self-governance, democratic self-governance, that I think we're kind of losing a capacity for. And it's what de Tocqueville described as being most fundamental to making democracy work, because individuals then have to learn from other individuals about common interests that they share, associationism, affective bonds, which several have mentioned here, that make for solidarity, and what de Tocqueville called habits of the heart, the capacity for self-governance. And again, it's a question I have. How are you sustaining that? How are you making that work? A little bit of my students have no idea how to have a meeting, just for example. And that sounds really trivial, and it's not, because these are kind of the fundamentals of collective action, collective effort, and of self-governance. And I don't know if it's the magic of Robert's Rules of Order. I suspect not. But yeah, so what's the deal? I see Ashley and I see Diana.
Okay, so we are, with all this emphasis on democracy these days and saving our democracy, and as one of our elected officials have said, and look, this club even has democracy in its name.
Yeah.
So, but I think, okay, we have shared visions, we have some different opinions.
Sure.
But I think respect for each other is a large part of it. And it goes even beyond that to, respect and affection. But I think we go, even if democracy is voting and the majority wins, we tend to work more toward consensus than just a vote and going with the majority and leaving some hurt feelings behind.
I am curious about that, because you must have a decision-making process.
Yes, we do.
And does it
We
require?
do, and think, and we, we have our bylaws and we try to go by Robert's rules and all that. But usually I tell you, when we have votes at our meetings, when it's something we have to vote on, this
Yeah.
resolution or this activity, when we do take a vote, it's usually unanimous.
I'm curious because it seems to me one of the important things in making democracy work is respect for difference. And that the distinction between dissent and disloyalty. And that's why I'm kind of curious. A lot of different issues here, people doing different things. And I'd be surprised if your differences weren't also sources of learning and sources of creativity. So that's why I'm kind of interested about that. Diana?
So thank you. And I wanted to add to what Ashley is saying, that we don't always agree with each other. And some of those discussions sound like a college debate exercise, right? That we are, but I think one of the things is very relational, that we have been together for a long time, most of us, and we do respect each other, and we do have an openness to hear other points of view.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's one of the keys for me, is that sometimes I do have to put my own self-interest aside in order to hear someone else's point of view. And in my relationships with members of my friends who are from communities of color, it has been that exercise for me, that that I am so connected to them and wanting to be so open to them that it helps me to put my own self-interest aside sometimes and really hear, because of maybe their background, which is a little bit different than mine. They're coming to the table with a little bit different experience. And so I need to respect that. And that's true of all of us, right? We come from different backgrounds in terms of our faiths. And I'm Protestant, very faithful person, Protestant, but not all of us are. And so I need to respect that and be able to hear what other people, what their experiences are bringing to the table. Because when we're looking at the larger community, they really have different experiences, right? We're all coming as progressives. But in addition to other people in the community having these other experiences, they may align with us because of our faith, but they have other issues that we need to be open to. And so I think that's one of the things that have kept us strong, is that we are this work is so important to us, that we take the time to listen to each other. And I think that has really made us very enduring, and it helps us in our talking to our electeds as well, because they know if we come into a meeting with guns a-blazing and they start telling us the reason for their making a decision, we say, oh, okay. I'm glad that we may not agree with them even then, but at least we have the value of hearing that different point of view. So.
It relates to another question. I see we have hands up, but I'm curious, how would you describe what you've learned over these years of working together? What's the learning been?
How to be effective.
Say a bit more about that.
How to have enough stamina to work an issue through in that dialogue, whether it's with legislators or with other like groups or other groups we want to have joined together to grassroots to make something happen, how to understand their
I'm focusing on what I'm supposed to be doing. Thank you for asking.
Wait, what?
Sorry, I don't know.
Yes.
Is somebody unmuted who's talking to someone else? Maybe. Sorry, don't mean to go on, but it feels as though it's, you can learn not only what other vantage points are, but you broaden your own ability to have a decision that's better for all in the end. And I think that texture of we continue to learn, but everybody from their different vantage points learn over time, gets decisions that can help influence legislation that does come out the other end.
Yeah, I'm curious how much, I'm just wondering about how much intentionality to, like, oh, let's say there's some new source of information or a new book or skills that seem to be really important, or I'm just how much intentional learning there is, and how much learning there is just from doing this work. You have to learn, because otherwise, you know, the world is changing all around us. We have to be learning all the time.
The speakers we bring in both introduce new topics to us from time to time, as well as deepen a different vantage point sometime that wakes us up to, gee, we'd better go do that or push for that.
Have you all written up anything about, like, how you've been doing this for 20 years? You know, I'm serious, because it's like, it's important. I mean, it's important that people know that such exists even. You know, it's sort of today, this discussion with, you know, I'm interacting with young people all the time. And I'm just wondering, do you have cross-generational conversations with people in their 20s, people who are just starting out trying to figure out how to do this stuff?
Well, our children and our grandchildren certainly.
Well, there is that.
Careful.
Yeah, there is that. That's important. But anything in a more intentional, well, that's pretty intentional too. No, I'm just curious about the cross-generational conversations, because I don't know that there's a whole lot of that. And I'm just wondering about it, because
could I say something about that, Marshall?
You sure may. Yeah.
Okay, so earlier you asked us what keeps us going, what keeps us motivated, why are we doing this, what have you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really taken and curious about the comment you just made about the younger generation, because for me, the younger generation is what it's all about, and it's what keeps me going.
Yeah.
And what I feel strongly about is that the younger generation, we need to listen to them more, and we need to let them get out front and be in a leadership place. Because I think back to when I was their age, and I was struggling around the anti-war movement, and I was struggling around civil rights, and I had, you know, really tough times within my own family, because my parents were very conservative. And so there's all, and so I felt, I don't want to say I felt voiceless when I was young, but I did feel really kind of depressed and defeated, especially my senior year of high school, when 2 months before graduation, Martin Luther King was assassinated in April, and all of a sudden my relationships with my non-white people in my high school all of a sudden took on a new dimension for me.
Yeah.
And then like less than 2 months later, the night before we graduated, Marshall, the night before we graduated, Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated. So how did we feel going through high school graduate? I'll tell you what, my whole life flashed on me at that point, and I really made a fundamental change in my sort of life direction. And I think it's why I became more of an activist.
June 5th.
Whatever.
No,
I'm glad you remember that day, but April 4th too.
Yeah, no, I'm remembering well, because sometimes, you know, what I'll hear from students is, well, how do you sustain hope? You know, in other words, if you've not been on the planet that long, and you look at what's been happening these last few years, and they'll say, well, how do you sustain hope? And, you know, we often look to young people for hope. I mean, it's a sort of, there's a reciprocity there that I think can be really fruitful. I'm just trying to, I don't know, it seems like in some ways we need each other, this kind of cross-generational conversation. because they have those questions. How do you hang in there? You know? And-
Successes.
Yeah, Marshall.
Yeah, sometimes we have successes, but we know we can't always have successes.
Yeah.
So we hope that by our efforts, we will have successes, but this is a never-ending process. Anybody that thinks it's going to end is misleading themselves, because every generation comes up with people that agree and don't agree.
Yeah.
And so it's the successes that I think reinforce much of our efforts, because we've seen incremental successes and backsliding as well. But the younger generation needs to have opportunities for justice and fairness and successes in these areas from many of our perspectives. And so I think that is one of our sustainable areas, but also it's been difficult to get younger people to be involved in our group. I think maybe it feels closed, or people are so familiar with doing this, or they just want to be with younger people. So we take the opportunities when we can, talking to younger people.
No, it's
we should probably try to have programs that somehow or other will bring younger people in, but it's been difficult.
Or engage with the groups of younger people. It's like when in the early days of the civil rights movement, when the sit-ins in North Carolina and Tennessee, and there was a question about the young people who were involved there. And the original intent was that they would become sort of a junior version of Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Dr. King's organization. And it was Ella Baker who insisted, no, they need to have their own. But that doesn't mean that, and that became the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which was then a critical piece of the spectrum. But it wasn't a rejection, it was just a difference from a different perspective. And to the extent that there was sustained conversation, sometimes there were struggles, fights, whatever, but people were at least listening and learning with each other. And sometimes people, again, think about the young people in Mississippi in 64, 65. A lot of us were there at the invitation of people like Medgar Evers, A.M.Z. Moore, E.W. Steptoe, who were of a previous generation, who saw the need for the combination. And so I guess I didn't plan any of this. I'm just really curious about what we can learn together, because, and I was really struck this morning about some time I spent with young people. It's like, there's a lot of wisdom here, and for me, what I get to do is really, I get to go to class twice a week and have a conversation with the future. I mean, that's pretty cool. And it's so rich for my own learning, and I think for my students, because we're engaged in that kind of ongoing conversation. It's not like, hey, I've got the truth, I'm going to tell you the truth. It's like we're working together trying to figure out this crazy world we're in and how do we move forward. So that's all. I'm not trying to make a pitch. It just occurred to me that might be a very fruitful thing to consider. That's all. But now I see a bunch of hands up. Ashley, Gregory, Gail.
So I see Gail first. Gail?
Okay, yeah, well, reflecting on that, I'm not sure. I really admire Bill's work with youth. I haven't been physically able to get out in the community in the same way as some other people. So I haven't been in the trenches on that, but sounds very useful and good thing to do. I'm amazed that the youth know as much and are as sophisticated as they are. When I look upon myself at that age, didn't know any of that stuff. So I'm very amazed by them. I would also, but I wouldn't know how to contact groups and bring them in. On the other hand, in my experience as a raging granny has been, if you know what we do, sing satirical songs or put on skits and wear funny grandma outfits, has been that we are like magnets for the young people, and they love being around us, and we'll, you know, and we do things together with them. Often notice they do have trouble making deadlines and organizing things, but they know a tremendous amount for their age. I'm blown away. That's my comment.
But it also sounds like they're getting something from what you all are doing. In other words, something
Somehow I
them to
don't
you as
fully
well.
understand it. I think maybe we're the grandparents that they wish they had, maybe, or the parents that they wish they had. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Sometimes it skips the parents, you know, it's sort of, there's that dynamic.
Yeah.
Gregory, go ahead.
Yeah. Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're good.
I am.
Yes,
Okay.
you're good.
Marshall, I'm interested in your opinion. And I want to know why 40% or 35% of this country follows Trump. That's my question to you.
Oh yeah, well, the answer is you know, as I'm sure you've, as we've all thought about that, you know, the 74 million people that voted for Trump. I mean, that was shocking. And I think there was a lot of surprise and disappointment about that. And, you know, I think there is such a huge gulf between elite conversation and what most people talk about. You know, we talk about right, left, but if you really think about the Twitterverse and you know, the sort of conversation of activists and academics, which I'm around, the extent to which it actually engages with people in terms of their everyday lives and their everyday concerns, I think is a big problem. I think now that's another reason I'm really interested in what you all are doing and how you've been able to sustain and do all that. You know, Macron in France was in trouble because he backed away completely from the egalitarian commitments that usually you expect from a progressive. And so it created a base for Marine Le Pen. And I don't know if you noticed, but very close, within 0.8 of a percentage point, was the left party. I mean, it could easily have turned into a runoff between Macron and the left party and not Le Pen. It's very close. But there's sort of a disconnect between what everybody needs in their lives and this whole commitment to the whole neoliberal thing, frankly. And it's in the Kennedy School, it's a place where there's a lot of that. And it just seems like finding a way to get in, to reclaim those egalitarian commitments that I think Democrats backed away from a long time ago, is going to be necessary, because what it does then is create a base for the nationalists. And Thomas Piketty, in his second book, the book Ideology and Capital, is very, very good, because he distinguishes between what he calls the Brahmin left, differentiated by education level, and then the merchant right, and the way in which the withdrawal from egalitarian commitment sort of creates a base on the other side. And I mean, that's what we're seeing, I think, part of it. So there's something about reconnecting to the needs real people have in their lives. And you don't hear a lot of it from the legislators. And now you all know the legislators. I'm sure there's very good legislators, but I don't know, Diana, mayors are in some ways more right in the line of fire, because mayors are elected. The people don't go away, they're there. The problems are there, they don't go away. And we've been doing some work with mayors. We do training in public narrative for about 30 to 40 mayors every year. It's been fascinating and hopeful. But of course, there's also,
you don't think Biden does have a more egalitarian policy?
I think he does, but he's not communicating it with the people.
Why?
That's a good question. It's a very good.
I mean, in what way is he not communicating it?
Well, because people don't experience the leadership. They don't make the connection out there. Democrats are pretty poor at making the connection. It's almost like, here, we're going to do a program and we'll promise you this, and then that's going to take care of people. But it doesn't. There's respect, there's actual engagement, there's listening. And so, look, it's not like I have some magic formula, but it is interesting whether we think, I mean, as you think about just the view of national leadership right now, or even state leadership, who seems to be having a real conversation with the American people in a way that is real and that isn't just full of hate? And I know Biden, I was very pleased to see Biden because he speaks human. You know, he doesn't speak policy, he speaks human. And that's really, that sounds so simple, but it's so important. So I don't know, this is, but it's a good question that's missing. Or maybe it's not, and I just don't hear it or see it. But I don't know, is this making sense, or is this something outside? I mean, you all have a different take on it. Just curious.
What do you think of Pramila Jayapal?
You know, I don't see or hear her enough to know. You know, in other words, if you think about the folks that pay attention to what's going on in Congress, that's not a lot of people. You know, that's not a lot of people. And this whole challenge of how you communicate with the public, and I'm not talking here about messaging, which is not communication from my perspective. It's branding, it's just advertising. But the sort of relational communication, the conversations with the public, I don't see too much of that. And she may be terrific, but how many people experience that leadership? I mean, mayors at least have to engage with their communities. Legislators, it's a little too easy sometimes to just talk. And there's a rhetoric of action that matters too. This is not a criticism of her at all. It's just sort of, how do we, you know, it's kind of like, I guess one thought is that, you know, the sort of the defund the police, for example, was seized upon by the right. And it was a well-intended thing, I think. But it's sort of what you hear are those voices whom the right uses, but where's the voices speaking for everybody else? Where are those voices?
Bill, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, Gail has her hand up too. And let's hear from some more folks too.
I didn't know I could speak, Marshall. That's why I put my hand up. I mean, there's a lot flying around here right now, and
yeah,
what Marshall just said. Okay, I just, I think you said something about who speaks for the people right now, or something like that. And,
well, who speaks with the people, right?
Okay, with the people, and my comment, my thought about that is that I think our communities, our society, our country, international wide, is so fractured right now. You can't really look to any one person to really unite across the board. The way I see it, Marshall, is a lot of it has to happen at the local level, in local communities, and building trust. And okay, so one of the reasons why I think we're effective in not just DFA here, but across the board with a lot of groups that I cross paths with around here, is I think people, I know so many people in this group tonight that are so active in other things that I cross over into. And when I think about that, I think about what's called collaboration. And when I say collaboration, I don't just mean that I have to talk to everybody who's here. I have to get out, like I was talking about youth, and not look for them to come to me. I'm going to them and listening to them and finding out how it is I can align with them. Okay, that's to me how it's got to happen. And that's where I see the progress and the victories coming from, frankly.
And how do you address the sharp distinctions with respect to race, with respect to gender, with respect to class, which we rarely acknowledge, but which is a big deal, I think. And that's not just for you, Bill. It's just a general, the
I would
fragmentation.
say number one is, number one is you listen. I mean, you
Yeah.
gotta, I mean, I'll say this, I've learned a hell of a lot about myself probably in the last couple of years, just by trying to do more listening, or realizing when I was speaking out and thinking I was communicating, I was really like maybe putting my foot in my mouth, and I didn't realize it at the time. But that has made me, I think, better at communicating when I can tune into that. And I think one of the things that I've learned from a lot of the people that are here tonight is that we're more effective when we listen to each other, not just each other here, but people across the community. You're talking about gender, you're talking about race, you're talking about class, all those things. So we've got to like open ourselves up and reach our hand out and listen to people. Okay, not just go out there thinking we've got the answers.
Oh, I
So
see.
Gail and
Wait,
April have
I'd
their
like
hands
to,
up.
Yes,
whoa.
Susie's going to
Marshall asked,
reassert order.
he wanted to speak to other voices. Let's hear from April next, because April hasn't been in the queue.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Susie.
One thing that I'm very involved in now that I think is going to be very important thing to model is deep canvassing, it's called, which is not just going to the door to ask for the vote, but going to the door to ask people what's on their mind, literally. So much of politics that I had been involved with was very much kind of almost a commodity. Like you go out and you get the person to register. So then you got the registration card. Then you send them the thing and then they go to the voting booth and then they vote. And it's always like a goal, a short-term goal. And then, oh, we won. Oh, that's great. That's not what this is about. And it almost sounds cliche to talk about relationship building, but that's really what's missing. It's like, I care about what's happening to you, not just because I'm trying to get something from you, but because there's a lot of things that I don't know. And our collective lives would be a lot better if I knew more of what you know and that you can tell me.
Yeah.
And we are working with a group in the Central Valley that's Latino run. And we go there to help them, and they're in charge because they know what's happening there. They make the decisions, and we're very happy to work collectively. And with some people, like the better educated, as you were saying, Marshall, from up here in Northern California, there's almost a subconscious kind of expectation that somehow, well, we know how to do this better. And even with people who are really wanting to do the right thing, it's a real challenge to be aware of your own motivations and how you're behaving, because it's so ingrained. And so one of the best things I think is to have the opportunity to be around people who aren't like you.
Yeah.
And I've made a very close relationship over the last 4 years with a Latina woman who's very outspoken and very plain in what she believes. And we discuss things sometimes. And then I notice by talking with her sometimes that the way I was thinking about something was not really seeing the whole point. And maybe things that I was doing were disrespecting her without realizing it. So you got to be able to not only look at yourself, but just be with other people where they are and not have any kind of idea that you can control it or determine what the outcome is going to be, but just to be there, hear what happens, and just go from there.
What I hear you lifting up is the sometimes unrecognized difference between mobilizing and organizing. Because what you're describing is organizing, it's listening, it's engaging, it's building relationships. But so much of our politics has become mobilizing. It's what you were describing to begin with. It's just go over here, show up over there, do this, do that. And it doesn't build anything. It just turns out people for a particular moment. And I know that's one of the challenges we have, is that the social media has made it so much easier to share information that if people are motivated, you can say, show up over here. And I spent some time talking with Wael Ghanem, who was the Google guy in Tahrir Square, and they did an amazing job of mobilizing, but they didn't build organization. They hadn't, the young people I'm talking about. The Muslim Brotherhood had the organization, so they walked away with the goodies until the military took over. So there's something, I'm just curious, how did you hear about deep canvassing? Because I think it's a terrific approach. Dave Fleischman in LA seems to be the guy who started that.
Well, the people I'm working with, it's actually a coalition of about, I think we have 18 groups in Northern California now, some Democratic groups, not too many, swing left, mobilize, and a lot of kind of unpolitically aligned groups according to the parties. And this is work that people have been they've been using this for a while. And the more we learn about it, we have trainers that come in and talk to us who just do an outstanding job. And it's a decision that there's got to be a better, more meaningful way to do this that brings about real change and real results. So it's basically from being aligned with these people that I'm working with now that we've learned about it.
Because my understanding, it began in LA after Prop 8, when, the night Obama won, and so did Prop 8, that made marriage equality illegal in California. And so one response, this is where Dave Fleischer was involved, was to go to the precincts where they lost and try not to sell, but to engage. And so these door-to-door conversations that were relational, that were about humans talking to humans, not just like, oh, you're a this, I'm a that, okay, boom, that defines who we are, these labels, has been very productive. And a lot of groups have been learning that around the country, because it does get at ways to break through the fragmentation, break through the elite, everybody else divide, and so forth. So April, I really appreciate your bringing that up.
All right, let's go on to Gail. You've got another question, Gail?
Well, I was, this relational way of doing things and going door to door is not my experience, and it probably won't be my strength ever. But when you ask, why so many people went for Trump, I think a lot of people, rightly or wrongly, felt that the Democratic Party didn't keep its promises. And when we see how our legislators, talk the talk, but don't walk the walk, we still try to be kind with them and gentle, but often are acutely disappointed by what they end up doing, despite their promises. And I think the influence of corporations is undeniable, so that a lot of people feel that, we're not even a democracy anymore, we're more or less an oligarchy. But that's taking the conversation in a different direction than what you're just talking about, which is organizing. So these are different aspects, I guess, of why Trump did so well and what we can do about it.
Yeah, because we have to get into, there's a difference between offering somebody a goodie and getting into respectful conversation. It's different. And the deep canvassing is much more about respectful conversation. Sometimes we're the only liberal democracy that has no constraints on campaign spending. Now, I'm not talking about where the money comes from. I'm talking about where it goes. And because of that, we've built this industry of political advertising, unlike any other country. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry because there's infinite demand. And so, so if you can't control the demand, every year, more money, more money, more money. I am so tired of getting all those emails and all those, and it's always money, 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 money. Well, it's making an industry that, frankly, gets rich off of all that, and who really have a stake in increasing the cost, because when they get commissions and percentages, it's based on that. So we have this mechanism, and this goes back to Buckley v. Vallejo, a Supreme Court decision deciding that money was speech. And I think it's not like we're going to change that tomorrow, but I think it's really important to understand the monetizing of politics, so that it's less people engaging with one another about learning and organizing and mobilizing than it's about advertising budgets. and about this constant need for more, more, more. Now, that's something we have to figure out how to deal with because it cuts at the heart of what the political process is, I think. And for me, I got a preview of this doing politics in California in the 80s because California was way ahead of the rest of the country in developing political consultants and that whole sort of advertising industry. So I don't know, it's just something I want to name. It's a challenge. And sometimes I think it's important to name these things, even if we don't have an immediate solution, so that we don't misdiagnose what's happening. It's kind of, people attribute a lot of things to culture that really have to do with institutions that don't work, like the Senate. Senate doesn't work, not in any democratic sense or not in even any functional sense. It doesn't work. And so it's sort of, we can't let our politics and all be defined by these institutional dysfunctions. So I don't know, is this making sense? I just think we need to really appreciate the dynamics that we're in the midst of, that we have to change if we're going to really revitalize this democracy.
All right. Elsa, you've got a question?
I do. This is, so deep and so we're so grateful. It's reminding me of democracy centers, which are Reclaim Our Vote has been setting up 11 of in the Southeast, which we call voter suppression states. And I just wonder whether spreading that nationally, whether every community needs a democracy center that doesn't go away the day after the election is over, but that stays with a physical presence to teach civics, to teach voter engagement, to interact with local legislators, to say, but here are our needs. Are you delivering them? And you campaigned on this, and yet this isn't fixed. How does that happen? And teaches them then how to engage door-to-door canvassing, phone banking, whatever that is, because that relationship has built over the non-election years. And I think every community needs that.
That was Howard Dean's so important move, was the 50-state strategy. And since Obama came, it went away, because that's the closest that I've seen on a national level, the Democratic Party come to the idea that we need sustained, ongoing organization. And you don't stick in the places where you only have a chance to win. You go to the places where you don't have a chance to win now, but you could in the future, because otherwise those become permanent red places. I don't know, I thought, but that's, again, it's one reason I find your organization so interesting, because it didn't go away after the election, because that's often what happens. We've all been involved in those kinds of campaigns. And I mean, frankly, my own disappointment with what happened to the Obama organization, it could have been so much more than it was. And so it was a wonderful campaign, but the sustained need for organization, growth, development, that's why I kind of want to draw out what you all have to teach, because there's some important things others have to learn from that.
Nancy, you've got a question?
Yeah, it's kind of following up on what Elsa said about the Center for Common Ground democracy centers, which really were set up in low-income Black communities in the South to help people who say, my vote doesn't count. After I voted for president, my sewer still backs up, and not get the connection of why your vote on a local level might matter even more sometimes for your day-to-day life. And basically, it's a great model because they identify somebody in the community who's already a leader, who already has a place, who already has a network and a nonprofit, and all they need is some money to help pay a stipend for that leader to do some extra outreach, or for other people to canvass, or to set up a food pantry, or to do a community needs assessment. And then that's what they do. They do assess what the community needs are. Like in Virginia, a lot of it is around restoration of rights to people who have been convicted of felonies, and they've loosened up on that a lot. And that's a need. And so the democracy centers in Virginia go around and help people understand how to restore their rights. And it's making it, like you said, exactly 24/7, 365 days a year, because people say the politicians in my community They only show up when they want my vote, and then nothing ever changes. And that reduces turnout right there.
Yeah. There's a saying in the Mexican community, al nopal no se viene a ver solo cuando tiene tuna, which means people don't come and look at the prickly pear in the cactus except when it's bearing fruit, which is to describe the politician showing up in the barrios just before the elections. And we all know about that. But unless we build our own organizations like you all have been doing, then it just is a cycle. And we need to do that. Stacey Abrams, her years of organizing, before it all became such a big, the last minute thing, it wasn't just the last minute stuff. There was deep investment in the building of infrastructure in Georgia that she knew what she was up to. And that infrastructure then created a foundation for when the moments were there was preparation for those moments. It wasn't just like, oh, sudden moment, and it has to do with the sustained ongoing building of organization, of infrastructure, of developing leadership, and the kind of work that it takes to drive democratic politics, little d and big D.
All right. Ashley, you've got a question? You're muted.
No, I'm
There you
not
go.
muted. Getting back, Marshall, to what you were saying about wondering what sets us apart, why have we stayed together? And you look at DFA, and during the height of the time that Howard Dean was running, there were somewhere between 700,000 and 800,000. No, I'm sorry, 700 to 800 clubs, DFA clubs around the country. They're only a handful now.
Yeah.
People have gone on. I really think what has set our group apart is the relationships that we've developed among ourselves, and the fact that we have been effective.
Yeah.
We know what our goals are,
Yeah.
and we have been effective in meeting those goals. So with the Obama thing, that was so much, I think, it was beautifully organized, but it was organized around a personality, around Obama. As I said, we were not that personally enamored of Howard Dean. We were grateful to him because he was the only one speaking out against the war. But we found a deeper mission, and we found people with the same ideas and who wanted to work together. So, getting back to that, I think that's the secret of our longevity.
Thanks for that, Ashley. And Rob has his hand up.
Yeah, it's a statement with a question for you as to what you think of it. We've talked about elections, about mobilizing voters and sometimes engaging with them. But, and you mentioned that the Senate is not functional. I agree with you, but I actually deep down think that we don't have a functioning democracy in so many other ways. And it comes down to a lot of things, including our electoral systems. We have single member districts. We don't have proportional representation. The number for presidential elections, you talk about swing states, but for Congress, the swing districts, there's so few districts that are actually at all competitive.
Yep.
And if there's no competition, the person can just do whatever the money tells them to do. So I think we just have so much to do in terms of creating an actually working democracy that it's really hard to get people engaged when they see the system doesn't work. So I'm curious how you would respond to that, and how do we get people to see some possibility there?
No, I appreciate it, Rob, because often I find I need to sort of remind people that we've never had a representative democracy. And I mean, ever since the 3/5 rule, we haven't had a representative democracy, where a Southern white vote counted 1 3/5 of a vote. It wasn't just one, it counted 1 3/5 because they got to count enslaved people as if they were citizens. And it was built right in at the beginning. And so what you're pointing out about single member districts, 51% of the representation. If you got, then you get it all. You get 100%, 49%, you get nothing. And the Senate is just such a anachronism because, you know, what somebody's vote in Wyoming is 64 times the value of your vote in California when it comes to how the Senate is constituted and the Electoral College, all of that. Now, really, you know, back in 1976, Jerry Brown was calling for a constitutional convention. Everybody thought he was crazy. And in a certain sense, there are constitutional problems we have. So then the question is, how do we recognize that, not misdiagnose what's going on? Because, you know, we say, yeah, turn out and vote, but if it doesn't make any difference, why would somebody turn out and vote? And so it's how do we build enough power, frankly, to begin shifting these things? Now, historically, you know, our politics have been a dance between social movements and parties. There's a wonderful book by Dan Schlossman called When Movements Anchor Parties. And he goes all the way back in the 19th century and shows how social movements that cross locality, that are rooted in deep commitment, that are really missions of kind of moral reform, because they're not just about the goodies, they're about what a goodie is even, have had big impact in shifting parties. It doesn't happen within the parties, though. It seems to come from movements of one kind or another, from the right as well as from the left. And so I keep asking myself is, what kind of movement will it take, does it take now, in order to get at this stuff that we've been talking about? One thing is, it's got to require a lot of unity, a lot of finding common values, common ground, so that all our differences don't paralyze us, but they become sources of learning and richness. That's easy said, not so easy done. Because, you know, there's all this talk about polarizing. And if you really look at the data, the polarizing was all on the right. You know, it's like the Republican Party turned into this very radical anti-democratic thing. Whereas if you look at the spectrum of Democrats, it didn't change that much. And so it's really been polarization on one side. What it's been is fragmentation on the Democratic side. And that's where I think we have a challenge. So, you know, these are all just, they're questions and things that we need to figure out. It's not like, I got a lot of questions, you know, don't look for the answers here, because it's something we're all trying to deal with. Susie, you have your hand up.
I do, and I'm gonna take my privilege as chair and ask the last question of the evening. And it really dovetails into just what you were talking about. One of the biggest problems we have, and I'll just take it local, is how do we find good candidates that are willing to run for office? And I'm going to take as an example our district attorney. We're having no luck finding anyone to run a legitimate good campaign, because they know it's going to be bloody. They know it's going to be ugly. And who would possibly put their family through that? So do you have ideas of how do we combat that? How do we encourage? And we're lucky here. We've got some wonderful young people running for office, but we need more. Every community needs more. And how do we try and generate that and encourage that? Because I think that's something our club could do.
Yeah, I would ask you. I mean, it's not like there's an easy answer. I think that movements are also relevant here. I mean, look at school boards. Look what's happening with the school boards all over the place. And, you know, the moral majority movement that Ralph Reed built started with school boards. And then from school boards, they took over the state Republican Party, and then they built upward. And so it was locally rooted, but it didn't stop with the local. In other words, it was grounded locally, but it didn't end there. It begins there, it starts there. So I don't know, Susie, I think see, I keep thinking about movement. I think one of the things that I feel sad about is that when we won the Obama election, there was such energy of young people wanting to go into government, wanting to do all this stuff. And it kind of got squandered, I'm afraid. And
Right.
so there are these moments, you know, and we're in one now that's a real crisis moment. And it's almost like, why would I run for district attorney or whatever, unless it was a cause, unless it was something that was a cause? You know, is it a good job deal? Probably not. I don't know, Diana, you run for office. You're what, deputy mayor? Did I get that right?
Vice Mayor, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so why do you run?
I have free parking.
That's the answer. Now we got it. You heard it first here. It's like,
Oh, housing. She is a lot more different.
yeah, but seriously.
I was indicating in my comments that I was a housing advocate, but the council that was in place then had disrespected me and the people that I brought to a meeting. And that was the moment that I decided I was going to run for city council, because people had been urging me to do it for some time. And I said, no, I'm more effective as an advocate. And after that evening, I realized it's not true. I'm not more effective outside. I need to be inside. So, yeah.
It's an interesting moment of truth, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, and it's, there's also a difference between inconvenience and injustice. What you said about disrespect, that matters, I think, a whole lot.
It does.
You know, it's, and in organizing farm workers, that wages were always an issue, but the abuse of treatment by foremen, supervisors, those offenses to respect really motivate people.
And it was the disrespect of my people, the people who had been evicted or were being threatened with evictions. That's like a mother, right? That's what got me, was the disrespect that they had been shown. But really, I do have a parking pass, so.
You're supposed to keep that a secret, you know.
And
no, I appreciate that.
And Marshall, I think I speak for everyone. We have so enjoyed this conversation, and it's been a conversation which is really, well, this is a group that just loves to do that. and maybe next time we can have it in person, and you know, we like to start our meetings with, you know, cookies and you know, a little bit of social.
Maybe
and
a glass
this just
of
would
wine.
have fit, would have fit just right in. But I really want to thank you. This has been tremendous, and just wow.
Susie,
so everybody, I just like to say, let's say thank you. And
Susie, could I ask just one thing before? No, I really appreciate this. No, I really appreciate this opportunity to have a conversation about this with folks who have been in it and from which there's a lot to learn. And I'm just curious about what takeaways you might have from the conversation we just had. Any, you know, insights, reflections, thoughts? Just take a moment. You know, you can speak up.
We can't not look at something as too big, like the DA race. We can't not take on things that look too big.
What else? Bill, you got your hand up.
I feel like we need to continue the conversation like we're doing tonight, Marshall. I'll just throw it out to my colleagues here tonight. I think we need to do some kind of, I don't know if I want to call it a retreat or just a support group club or whatever you want to call it, but something where some of us can just collectively come together and kind of talk about some of the same stuff that we're talking about tonight. I mean, I feel like some real energy from you, Marshall. I feel like you help people reflect better on some things. And I think you help us. I'm just speaking for myself right now, but I feel some grounding after interacting with you tonight. But I feel like it's got to go somewhere like beyond just start talking tonight, if you know what I mean.
Thanks, Bill. Flavia, just very quickly, I know we're out of time, but yeah.
I just feel like by you asking the questions the way that you did, we didn't realize that we knew this much, that we had this much.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, we were expecting to receive this great talk from Marshall Ganz, and instead we gave a talk about what makes us work. And so that was really great. I think, I learned a lot about our strengths. So that's it. That's all I was going to say.
All right. Well, that was a terrific end. And I'm going to say, one more time, Marshall, thank you so much. And it's been amazing. And I'm hoping that we can do this conversation again.
I hope so.
And maybe next time, like I said, in person would be really, really terrific.
And I want to see the conversation with the young people start.
Yes. Yes. And
that.
how do we collaborate with the kids? Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. No, thanks so much. Really, I learned a lot and I really appreciate the time. And good luck and hang in there. And thank you for all you've been doing and that you will do. So thanks very much. Good night.
Thank you. And,
Thanks.
this makes a perfect segue into Casey. Would you talk about member dues? Because it's that time of year. And Casey, you're muted.
Well, this seems a really hard act to follow, I have to say, but but this month is dues month, meaning that to become a member, you do have to give us a little bit of money, not very much. And you can go to our website, SMC DFA, and be able to make your dues payment for a year through PayPal. The dues are very modest. For an individual, it's $15 for actually it's $30 for a family. And as I say, unfortunately, we don't have credit card available, but we do have PayPal, or you can mail me a check, SMC DFA at 1330 Johnson Street, Menlo Park, California, 94025. And we'd love to have you join us. And those of you who this was the first night that you have experienced SMC DFA, I'm just going to emphasize all the things that everyone said about how well we get along and the work that we do. It's phenomenal. Thank you.
Bravo.
All right. Thank you, Casey. Thank you. So let's get our membership dues sent in. Do we have any candidates with us tonight that want to speak for a minute? Nancy?
I'm not a candidate, but we invited Christina Corpus, but both her kids are sick. They don't have COVID or they tested negative. So she was going to try to join, but she's got 2 school-age kids and I guess that didn't work. But I can vouch for her. She's a super good candidate. Transparency, integrity, community engagement, bring them into the 21st century policing, bring in more diversity in the force, and do a better job responding to mental health. And half of us are already volunteering for her. If you need a yard sign, let me know.
And that then goes into a beautiful segue into Marshall. Do you want to talk about the elections task force? And you've got a report.
Not this Marshall, that Marshall.
No, Marshall didn't do it. But it's a great one because he's going to be talking about not only some of our local races, but also other races across the country.
Yeah, thanks. Let's see if I can possibly, no, why can't I share the screen? There's something messed up on I can't share the screen. So I'll just have to mention it.
The host has to empower you, whoever the host is.
Yes, Marshall, you are a co-host, so you should be able to.
I know, but I went to share screen and it says I have to go to preferences and I don't see any options
Oh.
here. So, so I'm not sure what the problem is. So.
Try one more time, Marshall.
I can't do it.
Talk to us.
Okay, so I will just talk to you. Okay, so the task force has deliberated again about primarily about House of Representatives and Senate candidates. And what we are proposing as ones that we support, we have 5 House representatives and 5 Senate candidates that are running these are countrywide. And we are recommending support in the House for Jevin Hodge in Arizona 6th District. He needs primary support. It's a DFA endorsed candidate. It's not clear that he would be the strongest Democratic candidate, but he's very progressive and he's opposing an incumbent, and we're hoping that that is a possible win. Christy Smith in California 27. We strongly support her now because she's in a flippable red district. So Christy Smith. Jay Chin in California 45 also needs strong support now. And he's been endorsed by the Democratic Party and is in a flippable red seat also. And as everybody knows, we need to have as many Democrats elected to Congress as possible so that we don't lose the House. The third is Summer Lee in Pennsylvania, District 12. She was a strong Bernie endorsed progressive, and there are 2 Democratic opponents, and she needs financial support, and we are solidly behind her in this solidly Democratic district. Jessica Cisneros, many of you may know, is running against the incumbent Henry Cuellar, who is the only Democrat in the House who is a anti-choice and anti-progressive. And we are strongly suggesting that people support her. In the Senate, we have 6, of course. We have to get these people either re-elected or elected. Mark Kelly in Arizona, Raphael Warnock in a tough race in Georgia. Both of those need lots of support now. And when we talk about support, we're not only talking about money, we're talking about texting, phone calls, and on the ground effort. Sherry Beasley in North Carolina is the presumptive Democratic nominee, and she needs support now in all those ways, as does Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada. And then the newly nominee in the Democratic Party in Ohio, Tim Ryan, as anybody that's been watching the news knows that she is now going to be facing J.D. Vance in Ohio, and anything we can do to ensure his election is necessary, and Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire. So those are the 5 in each of those, and in the Senate and the House. And in addition, the task force reminds our membership that we do not make endorsements in our local candidate elections races, but we can bring some local races to the attention of our membership. And we are mentioning 2 races that the task force discussed so that the membership could strongly consider their merits. The first, which you've already met, she has spoken to us, and that's the candidate for sheriff who's running against the incumbent sheriff, and that is Christina Corpus. And as we said, we can't endorse her, but depending on your evaluation of her positions as compared to the other candidate, the current sheriff, we note again that she has received the endorsement of the San Mateo County Democratic Central Committee, and that her positions on numerous issues are those that we support. And the difference between the incumbent and her should be considered. Again, that's Christina Corpus for sheriff. And the other candidate, the other race that we considered was the race for county assessor and chief elections officer. And that person is running against the incumbent, and the person that we are asking people to take a look at closely is David Pollock, who is running. He is a member of our chapter and also a member of our elections task force and shares our progressive values. So although we are not officially endorsing either of these candidates, we hope you will look at them and remember their names and look up to see if their values align with yours. We think they probably do. So that's our task force, elections task force for the moment. A number of primary, you may ask why the list is so relatively short for the House of Representatives and Senate, and that is because many of the candidates that we are looking at closely are in primary races that many of them need to be determined by their local people, and then we will jump in about whether we want to strongly support them or not. And similarly in the Senate, as soon as some of the primary decisions are made, we will then strongly jump in. Thank you.
All right, and Marshall, I'm going to add just a little bit, particularly about the sheriff's race. I'm going to share my screen real quick. What I want to share is there was supposed to be another candidate forum coming up on the 12th for the sheriff's race, and the sheriff has backed out of that forum. And so there was only one forum. It was held on the last week on the 27th. There is a recording. This is Thrive Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization on the peninsula. They have a link to the League of Women Voters candidate forum. They also have, what I wanted to show you was they have a questionnaire that they put out to both of the candidates. And the questionnaire was returned by both, and they have it posted here in both English and Spanish. And it's a terrific way. There was a set number of questions that they were both asked to respond to. And it's another way, since there won't be another forum, it's one way that you can get to know both of the candidates a little better. They've also got some other candidate forums up here. There's one tomorrow for our Board of Supervisors races, and that one is going to be specifically looking at children's issues. But there are some other forums that they've got. Most of these were online, and so these were posted here so that you can come and take a look. And I just wanted to share that you know, there's a number of a lot of information out there for especially our local races. And like we talked earlier, really those local races are some of the most important to us personally. So yes, the state and national are important, but frankly, who's on your school board, who's running your, who's on your board of supervisors, they're making your local decisions. Okay. Do any of the other task forces, we do have a few minutes if any of the task forces want to. Elsa?
Thanks so much. I put a link in the chat, and Hank Abrams either is or was here. Thank you, Hank, so much. But the Governor Newsom, who campaigned on single-payer health care, and then reneged at the very end of his campaign and did nothing to support his 2-year healthcare commission that he set up to look into single payer, needs to hear from you. A week ago Monday, that commission had its final meeting and published its 2-year in the making report. The report has lots in it to promote and to encourage and to say we have no other choice than to go to single payer. However, it didn't completely outline the path there, and Newsom did not comment on it. We need all of you to call Newsom's office, because he's the guy who can help push it, and he's the guy eventually who will sign that legislation once we, the people, get it to go through. Please call that phone number. I'll put it in the chat again and say, we're so glad that your commission lauds single payer and realizes why we can't go anywhere effectively with healthcare, and it'll cost even more in 10 years that we can't afford unless you pass it. So please encourage it when the bill is reintroduced in 2023. And I have to say, Hank Abrams, I always call him Aaron, who was here before, so leads the Northern California version of a physician group whom Ashley and Marshall Dinowitz have both met in meetings where we got both of our assembly people to agree to move from no votes to yes votes for that CalCare legislation that unfortunately didn't go through this year. But if over the next 9 months with this PR campaign that we've now got the whole coalition working on, and the first time out of the bat, we got 6 great articles, including from the San Francisco Chronicle. We've never gotten that before. We've got our act together. We have a new communications group that I get to chair, thanks to you for having us join that coalition. And it is very effective, we think. So we're spending the next 9 months with all the people you've met before from other groups, the nurses and Cara and people from a lot of different age groups, to visit legislators and their staffs and candidates also who are running against some of the no votes, so that by the time November comes around, healthcare is once again a key debate point in those elections, and that it'll be a lot easier for us in January to have more votes going in for it and to hold sway, we hope, so that before June, when all those decisions get made, this time we get to adopt CalCare. So if you could please, I'll put it in again, if you could please call Newsom. You could even put it in your electronic calendar once a day, call Newsom, just have it repeat. Thank you.
All righty. Diana?
Thanks, Susie. Just very briefly, the Social Justice Committee met. I didn't see whether Gail was still on. She may have something that she'd like to add. We started the conversation by Susie and I were talking about San Mateo and Redwood City are part of a pilot program that has introduced mental health clinicians into the police forces, into the police departments, so that when police go out on a call that has been described as having someone with mental health issues, the clinician can go with them. And we have both had very positive reports. And I can tell you, as someone who's been getting those reports a little bit more frequently, perhaps, I have learned that our clinician in Redwood City is following up. For instance, she doesn't work on the weekends. So she spends the week going back and checking in with the families and the individuals. She knows she has a first name base. She's on a first name basis with many of the our homeless characters that are in Redwood City that we have had. The city has had challenges with, and she's just amazing. And so I know Redwood City and the other communities that are having that have introduced the mental health clinician are also having that experience. Our social justice committee also had a report on Fix in San Mateo. Elsa had reported that Anna Eshoo, our congresswoman in our area, offered to write a letter to the Board of Supervisors urging an oversight of the Sheriff's Department, which we agree was a pretty big deal. And then we have not let go our interest in bail reform. And the last month's meeting with DBUG just made us all the more interested in not letting this go. So that's my brief report of the Social Justice Committee. And I don't know if Gail is on, if she wants to
Yep.
do anything. Oh, I can also say that the Navigation Center in, so the 240 bed Navigation Center, we just broke ground last week, 2 weeks ago, and it is expected, because these are units that are coming in from the outside. It's not being constructed on the ground, but they're module units that are being brought in, and it's going to bring San Mateo, this and the hotels that have been purchased will bring San Mateo County to function zero by the end of the year. And I'm just had to get that out there. So.
And I just want to say that Congresswoman Jackie Spear talked about that in her town hall tonight. That was before this meeting. All right, Gail.
I do want to support what Diana said, that we're still following the issue of bail, and oddly, our county has money to work on alternatives to bail, but there's no transparency. We hope for some transparency there. And also, we're following the issues of water allocation in California, which has a really big social justice component and is not going well at this time in our state, which is one of the reasons why we get disappointed with our legislators.
All right, thank you, Gail. You know, the other point I wanted to say too is, you know, one of the things that Jackie Spear talked about today was using our local resources and making sure that we share that information. And there were a couple calls on tonight's town hall. You know, one was about immigration, and it was, no, please call my office and we can see if we can help you. The other was talking about something that was a little more local, and it was, you know what, you need to talk to Kevin Mullen and you need to talk to Josh Becker. These are your local state reps, and talk to them to see if they can help. And that's one of the things I find, you know, really helpful, is the more we can share the knowledge that we've gained over the years, because not everybody knows that you can call your congressperson and have them help you with a problem. And you know, little things like that, you know, it means a lot to the person on the other end, that, you know, their Social Security check didn't come. Well, your congressperson can help you. They can connect with Social Security and get an answer when you're going to go through the mill trying to get it yourself. So were there any announcements or anything? Anything else, please? Ashley?
Yes, just a quick announcement that at the May 19th meeting of the San Mateo County Democratic Central Committee, the speaker will be Bart Charlo from Samaritan House, who's going to be talking about homelessness in San Mateo County. So I know Diana will be.
And I just want to put a plug in for Friday, June 3rd. We're hoping that is going to be our SMC DFA summer party. We're all pending COVID. We're all pending COVID. It could change, but we've got our fingers crossed that everything's good and we can have an in-person gathering in Diana's garden. So stay tuned. We'll send out the newsletter in mid-May and let you know for sure. And I think we're done unless anybody's got anything else. Oh, Elsa?
Just one quick one. I notice Marshall Ganz is still on this. Marshall, you're so invited to that party if you want to stay in the area a few extra days beyond May. But I also would like to say that Marshall occasionally does speak at Stanford, and we'll keep an eye peeled for in case there are any more of those options. You know, after tonight that it is more than worth your while. Every minute is just so mesmerizing. And Sir Marshall, if you would ever like to come back for something else that we create around you that could be that in-person event while you're still here, you know you've got the choir singing in front of you. So thank you so much again.
Thanks, Elsa. And we do have this panel tomorrow at Berkeley, tomorrow afternoon, on what we're doing about the political mess. It's sponsored by Marianne Fourcade. I can send you the thing because they're streaming it, and it should be interesting. And then there's another one on Friday at Berkeley with John Powell, talking about polarization or not polarization, or what the issue is. I can send you links to both of those.
Great. Many thanks.
Yeah.
Wonderful. We can send them out on the talk email.
Perfect.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. It's been a delightful evening, and we're actually ending just about on time. Just kind of a miracle. All right. Thank you all. And,
Good night, everyone.
And I know,
Thank you.
Good meeting leadership, Susie.